Good morning. Thank you, Constance, for that kind introduction. And thank you, GovExec, for having me here today to speak about the strategic ways that we are working to modernize our federal workforce at OPM. So the President's Management Agenda calls for three areas to transformation and how we can transform and fundamentally improve government. For those of you who've been working on the President's Management Agenda, like a lot of the folks I see here in the front row, we can sort of recite these by heart. They are 1, information technology modernization, 2, data transparency and accountability, and 3, building a workforce for the 21st century, which of course is near and dear to our hearts at OPM. But all three of these key pillars of the President's Management Agenda require people and require a great workforce, which is why what we're doing at OPM and part of the PMA is such a huge part of the President's Management Agenda. Because we know as traditional workforce skills are changing with automation, and that's one of the things obviously we're here to talk about today in this conference. The federal government needs to change how we do our work as well. And OPM is here to help agencies and help our partners who are engaging in the mission all across the federal government to empower federal employees to do more high-value work, to move up the value chain from low-value work to high-value work. We've seen this in our own personal lives, everything we do now or we can do on the smart devices that we're carrying around in our pockets and our purses. It's just how we do work in the federal government is one of those areas. We conduct our lives in one way with our personal devices, and we go to work, and we conduct our lives in an entirely different way with the technology that is available to us. So we're working to change that. But that requires, the work that we're doing here as part of the President's Management Agenda, because those skills, McKinsey just did a study which told us, I think, something we already know, that as we look into the future, 10 or 15 years, demand for leadership and management skills and technology skills are going to increase, and the demand for skills like data entry and data processing are going to decrease. As we know, for all of us who work in the federal government, there's a lot of data entry and data processing in the work what we do. So how do we deal with these challenges? We've seen sort of the advent, especially in our cohort in the private sector, dealing with robotic process automation and artificial intelligence, and that helps do a lot of the work that we need to get done. So if you look at one of the examples I like to give about how we deal with robotic process automation, and a lot of the work that can sort of take the place of is sort of the compliance-related kind of work where you're filling out forms and checking for accuracy and making sure all the required information is available. That's the kind of work that is sort of readily available to be sort of automated with the use of artificial intelligence. So if you look at a department of, say, 100 people in an HR department in a big agency, and maybe 30 or 40% of the work that each employee does is this kind of sort of required work to make sure all the requirements are met, the paperwork is filled out, the boxes are checked. If you find a way to automate that work, you have basically removed 30% of the work off of the plate of 100 people, which is essentially you've just created 30 FTEs without hiring a single additional person. And this is very important for us to keep in mind, because as we know, the cohort of federal employees that are at or nearing retirement, we're always talking about the large number of federal employees that are getting ready to retire. We need to be able to deal with what will look like a shrinking federal workforce, because with the economy where it is today, we have the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. So the federal government is competing for talent with people all over the place. But one of the things the federal government has that other employers don't is mission. There are so many. If you look at Gallup recently did a survey where I think they said only 4 in 10 of employees in American companies feel that, now apologies to Gallup if I don't get the exact wording of this right, but basically they feel that the work that they do as part of the mission of their organization is important. And that number for the federal government is 96%. So we have a huge attraction for people who are interested in engaging in mission and doing work that they feel is important, that is valuable, and we just need to work together, and we're taking a leading role in this at OPM in making it easier for people to engage in that work and to be able to be part of that mission, and that's part of what we're doing in terms of trying to make it easier to hire people, trying to make it easier for folks to be able to get on board with the federal government, because as we know, it takes a little while right now to be hired as a federal employee. OPM, we are working with agencies to sort of help empower them, and I think we can sort of put this in three categories as we work towards this. One is we're working with them to thoughtfully and strategically implement upskilling and reskilling programs. We're helping agencies conduct performance management in new ways, and we're innovating how the federal government hires. One of the, I see some of our, as I mentioned, our agency partners here in the front row. So OPM has been working with the Department of Housing and Urban Development and Department of Homeland Security in leading the HR change management and communications community of practice, and this is one of the ways that we're working with federal agencies, with other subject matter experts and policy experts to figure out what are the things that they are doing that is working, what are the innovations that they're engaged in that other agencies can learn from, because we have 24 CHICO agencies, each of them with different missions and different ways of going about them, different demands, different times of the year that things get crazy for them based on what their missions are. And how do they deal with the challenges that they are facing? We just had a CHICO council meeting yesterday, as a matter of fact, where we had our newly confirmed director. That's actually a little piece of news. We have a newly confirmed director at OPM who was there with the co-chair or the vice chair of the CHICO council, the former OPM acting director, and the now full-time, back to being full-time deputy director for management, Margaret Weichert. So it was good to see everyone together there with all of our CHICO agencies, because the work that they're doing there is so important. I mean, the CHICO Council has come up with a number of ways to streamline how we do hiring, to suggest to the OPM leadership what items can be delegated back to agencies so that they can be more nimble and more effective in what they're doing with strategic human capital, because there's so much of what we do at OPM that, as I say, is compliance and rules-based. We're constantly signing off on approvals for agencies to do X, Y, and Z. And I look at these things, they come in these folders that are, have red and white stripes on them, so we call them red stripies because they require agency leadership sign-off. So everyone has to sign off on them, the general counsel, and I review a lot of them, and the chief of staff, and then they finally go to the director. And some of these things were just like, well, why are we approving bonuses for $12,000 for an employee at the Department of Agriculture? Like, what do we know about this employee? Why does this have to be approved by the OPM director? It doesn't make any sense. So these are the kinds of things that we're saying, look, I think the Secretary of Agriculture is probably the best person to make that decision about what employees in that agency deserve a bonus that is above the statutory threshold of $10,000. So finding ways to basically push that responsibility back to the folks who have the best information and have the ability to make these decisions. So anyway, getting back to so we have a sort of a multi-pronged effort here. We're pushing information and pushing authority back to the folks who can make it, while we can focus on sort of the strategic human capital side of what the federal government as an enterprise needs to do. So as federal agencies look to reskill and upskill employees, we want to make sure that they are retaining the institutional knowledge that they have in their federal workforce to be able to realize efficiencies. Because as I mentioned earlier, as the federal workforce, a larger and larger cohort of it moves towards retirement, we need to make sure that as we automate processes that we are moving employees up the value chain and that we are not losing employees, because we need to hold on to that institutional knowledge. So we've at OPM have a couple of ways that we're helping agencies navigate this change, Three of these examples are: one, we're helping agencies as they reskill and upskill segments for the workforce. We're learning successful practices from agency incubators and adopters, kind of like the way federalism works in our country, or should work. We see how different states are doing things and what works best before we sort of bring it up to the federal government and say, let's go nationwide with this policy. So we like to see what various agencies are doing to innovate and treat them as incubators, and those that work, we bring up and share with other agencies to do. And then we want to make sure we're preparing our workforce for change. So we've come up with this toolkit called Accelerating the Gears of Transformation, which help agencies with modernizing their workforce. And this toolkit includes reskilling and change management and strategic decision making. I won't bore you with any more details of that, but it's on our website, the Gears of Change. And these tools are going to help agencies implement transformation to be more, so we can have a more agile, innovative workforce to better able to retain our highest performers. So we're also looking at ways, not just how do we transform human capital in the federal government, but how can we have a more effective and efficient workforce today with the tools that we have in place right now. And as many of you know, in May of last year, the president signed 3 executive orders that relate to the federal workforce. These speak to laying a framework or groundwork on how agencies deal with collective bargaining agreements to ensure that they are sort of done in a more reasonable time frame and they don't drag on for months and years, that if things aren't able to be resolved, there's a process in place for ensuring timely resolution of these items. Establishing parameters for taxpayer-funded union time. I think the general rule of thumb that the guidance that we issued said, it should be around 25% or an hour per employee in a bargaining unit. And how do we streamline dismissal for poor performing employees? Because that's one of the areas where if you look at the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, only 32% of federal employees say action is taken to deal with poor performers in their work unit who cannot or will not perform. And it's really one of the lowest numbers, if not, I think, the lowest number that we have on the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. So, the president has is aware of these numbers, and I think the action that we've taken is, in a direct response to how do we address the concerns of federal employees, and how do we also ensure that we have an efficient and effective federal workforce. OPM is also developing a framework to use new technologies to conduct performance management in real time. So this is one of these things that's called, a pulse-based feedback tool, and what this does is it allows supervisors and managers to engage in real-time conversations about work that employees are doing. So you don't have to wait until the end of the year for an employee and a supervisor to have a formal performance review. You can do sort of these, project-based performance reviews where you say, hey, I think you've done a great job on this, or get some 360-degree feedback. So throughout the year, as employees are engaging in mission, their supervisors and the employee can have conversations about how they're doing. So you have, it's engaging with digital, it includes data analytics. It's on a digital platform. So these are some of the ways that we're working to improve that. And this is all in concert with agencies as they work to become innovators and incubators of what we're doing. So we're looking forward to sharing the results of these resources and successful models to improve performance management and address poor performance. But for now, I'll say that many of them are centered on the imperative to give managers the training, to give them the support, and give them the tools they need to identify and address workforce issues. And finally, we want to make it easier to recruit top talent and bring on people more quickly. There are things agencies can do today, such as using online assessments to help us identify people with the right skills, or eliminating burdensome policies and procedures as part of the hiring process to make that move more quickly. And I'm happy to say we're already seeing a lot of these happening. OPM just finished conducting its human capital reviews with the 24 Chico agencies, and we've already seen agencies using the hiring flexibilities to decrease the time it takes to hire new employees. And we've seen agencies implementing a lot of promising practices, including using shared certificates, using recruitment bonuses, direct hire authorities to bring on people more quickly. And we've also seen a third of Chico agencies using new technologies to make them more efficient and improve customer service. So for example, in 2018, USAID introduced its online employee portal for HR called Launchpad. It provides employees with 24-hour access to their personnel data, including retirement plans, leave balances, and benefit elections. And what that does is it frees up HR folks to be able to do things rather than just sort of the care and feeding, to sort of move up, upskill. They don't really need to be upskilled. They have the skills. They're just spending a lot of time doing sort of the care and feeding things, but freeing them up to be able to do the kind of human capital work that needs to be done in federal agencies, but which often gets crowded out by sort of the necessary and the urgent work that needs to be done on a day-to-day basis. So what this opportunity that USAID has piloted does, it increases convenience for employees, managers and HR specialists. They have an easier time tracking personnel actions, and employees are doing more high-value work, and their customers, the employees at the agencies, have reported much higher satisfaction. Another small example of how agencies are sort of moving up the value chain with AI and RPI is, the FBI is using new technology to analyze fingerprints for how law enforcement and investigative entities, how those are processed at the FBI. So FBI leadership managed a communications program for transparency. They kept employees informed, and they identified new and innovative ways to create opportunities for employees. And they also engaged the workforce, who assisted in incorporating the technology to include faster and better results. So as a result of this, we have more employees at the FBI doing more high-value work, and as a direct result of that, their pay and their grades increased proportional to their new responsibilities, and the implementation of this technology caused zero job loss and led to higher skilled, more engaged, and a happier workforce. So these are, and we're seeing, these are just small examples, but every agency, I think, has examples like this where we're implementing technology to make things more efficient and effective. And the key is, if we engage the workforce, it's a sort of triple bottom line when everyone, management wins, the workforce wins, and the taxpayer wins. As part of improving how we hire, especially as we move more into the technological type jobs and positions which can sometimes be a little tricky for folks who aren't technology experts. How do you hire someone to do the technological things you need when you're not really sure of the technological competence and skills you need to hire these folks? OPM has worked with, we created a partnership with the U.S. Digital Service and with the Departments of Health and Human Services and the Department of Interior to test an additional effective practice. So what we've done is we've gotten together the agency hiring manager, the HR specialist, and subject matter experts from the U.S. Digital Service to work together on the hiring process. And what we've seen from that is we've been able to speed the hiring process and improve the quality of hires. And I think we've learned basically, there are 5 key steps that we're going to see hopefully rolled out to other agencies that they can incorporate in their hiring process. 1 is making sure you have close coordination between HR and the hiring manager. 2 is making sure that everyone involved in the hiring process blocks off time to expedite the hiring process, because as you know, things sort of get a lot of the delays in the hiring process. One person is done, they pass it on to someone else. Maybe it doesn't get acted on immediately. They have to pass it on to the next person. Every single one of these processes can add unnecessary time if folks are not acting on them in a timely manner. Ensuring that, the third thing we need to do is ensure that we're conducting a thorough job analysis, carefully creating an occupational questionnaire, and then strategically recruiting to find the best candidates. So this partnership, and I think others like it, will continue to make improvements in how we bring talent into government. I think I will, in closing, I'll just leave you with a couple of brief thoughts here. There are transformational opportunities within the federal government that change the way we are doing our work. OPM's role is to help agencies implement these changes in the smoothest and most effective way possible. And part of helping agencies is ensuring that we keep federal employees at the center of this effort. Because we know that federal employees are able to achieve their full potential when given the proper training and tools to succeed, and when they're rewarded for achieving and exceeding their goals. So we need to continue to focus on how to make the best use of the talent that we have today and prepare for the needs and talent of the future. So I'm proud of the role that OPM is playing with our partner agencies, the tools that we're making available to help assist agencies and our nation's workforce, and the motivation to continuously grow and move forward. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm excited about the work that we are doing, that we have done, and that we will continue to do. So with that, I will leave it there, and I will open it up to questions if anyone's got questions or comments about what we are doing today. Are there any microphones in the room, or are we just going to ask folks to use their best stentorian voice? Okay. We've got hands up here.
Thank you, Mr. Rigas. I'm Arnold King, and my question is, are you familiar with digital workforce management in the federal government? If so, what plans are you doing to implement digital workforce management in the federal government?
So what plans are we doing?
What plan for digital workforce management? It's about HR.
Yeah, about workforce management in the federal government?
Yeah.
So we have, I think, some of the things I touched on briefly in my statement is, the president signed 3 executive orders with relation to workforce management to help improve how we are dealing with poor performing employees. As I mentioned, I think 32% of federal employees think that agency action, that enough is done to deal with with employees who cannot or will not perform their work. But we also have, for folks who want to be able to move up the value chain from lower value work to higher value work, we've had I think we're on our 2nd cohort now of the Digital Academy, where folks who are working in the federal government and want to move more into the technology space are able to get the skills and training that they need to sort of change the kind of work that they are doing. There's a number of training opportunities that OPM, on our sort of HR USA Learning opportunities for employees to get training that they need, both at the sort of frontline worker level, the supervisory level, all the way up to the Federal Executive Institute that we have in Charlotte, which does a lot of the executive training that we have for our higher level supervisors, 13s, 14s, 15s, and SES, and the kind of training that you might see at that folks get when they go off to these graduate schools to get their master's in public administration. So there's a lot of training opportunities, and it's important that supervisors and their employees have conversations about development and how they can sort of chart a career path. Thank you. Yes. Oh, okay. I guess we are out of time for our opening remarks. I'm going to be on a panel next with a couple of my colleagues here, so folks who do not get a chance to ask a question will hopefully be able to shoehorn it into the panel that we've got coming up next. So thank you, and I appreciate your time today.